My name is Stephanie Diekman, and I am one of the co-founders and leaders of the High Country Tableau Users Group. And I'll be moderating the meeting today. So if you have questions, go ahead and post them in the Q&A, and I will try to keep track of them and make sure that, our presenters get those questions. And then myself and Ginny, our other co-founder and leader, will introduce ourselves in a few minutes. So let's talk a little bit about about what we're going to talk about today. Since this is our first meeting, we'll do introductions first, and then we're going to explain the objectives of a TUG meeting and how HC TUG came to be. And then we're going to move on into the presentation portion of our meeting. We have two great presentations today. First, Ginny is going to talk about data stories in Tableau. And then for our second presentation, we are excited to have Tableau ambassador and leader of the Raleigh-Durham TUG, Chris Scott, here to discuss meaningful analytics. And again, if you have any questions during the presentations, please enter them into the Q&A. And each presenter will leave a little bit of time at the end of their talk to answer some of those questions. And then we're going to wrap things up. We're going to share a follow-up survey with everybody, and then we're going to talk a bit about the next meeting. So, who are we? So, like a lot of data professionals, my career started in another totally different area, web design and development, which I did when I worked at Indiana University in Bloomington, Indiana. And I began using Tableau in 2016 when I got a job in the Office of Institutional Research at the University of Southern Indiana. About a year later, in cooperation with the business school, I helped start the Southwest Indiana Tableau User Group. And I also taught data visualization and Tableau at USI for credit and non-credit courses. And I earned my desktop specialist certification in 2019. And then also in 2019, I made the big move to North Carolina for my dream job. I currently work for Samaritan's Purse in Operation Christmas Child as a Tableau developer. So now I'm going to let Ginny introduce herself.
Thanks, Stephanie. I'm Ginny Moench, and I too found Tableau because I worked in institutional research. But my background is actually in anthropology. So before I got this job, I really didn't have a lot of experience with data, didn't have a data background at all. So I started using Tableau in 2012 when I worked for Caldwell Community College. My boss came to me one day and she said, "I heard about this program. Why don't you check it out? Let me know if you think it'd be useful for us." And sure enough, I thought it was awesome and told her, absolutely, we need to have this. And from there, I was kind of hooked. I mean, I moved into a couple of other jobs in institutional research after that. When I moved over to Winston-Salem State University, they weren't using Tableau, so I convinced them, hey, we need to have this, and sure enough, we got it. And then I actually came up here to work at Appalachian State University because they wanted someone who would just always do Tableau work, and I wanted a job where I could really focus in on that and not have to do that just as part of my job, but it's really the bulk of my job now. And so I sat for my Tableau desktop qualifying associate exam in 2018 at the Tableau conference and was able to pass that, which was a huge milestone for me. And now I'm here.
Awesome. Thanks, Jenny. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the objectives of a Tableau users group. So our first objective is we want to get to know other data and data visual professionals in our area. So each meeting, we'll make sure to set aside a lot of time to network and get to know each other better. And our next objective is just to share knowledge with each other. Every meeting, we plan to have 1 to 3 different presentations. And these presentations may be anything from a simple user story to something a little bit more technical, maybe some sort of follow along training session. And we want to encourage everyone to present. Jenny and I don't want to be the only two presenters at every meeting. We want to also learn from you guys. So please keep that in mind. We really want this group to be active and very involved. So our next objective is going to be to create an environment where we can help each other out with our issues and our problems with Tableau. We currently do have a site in the Tableau community, which we'll begin developing soon. And we're thinking about building a LinkedIn group. So all of these options will give us a way to communicate with each other more easily. And then next, Tableau is very big on helping our surrounding communities with data. So we may decide in the future to join forces to help an area nonprofit or maybe solve a community problem using data. And then finally, I think probably everybody knows is that Tableau is very big on having fun. So we may have our own contests or competitions, night outs, or other sorts of get-togethers. And of course, when we have in-person meetings, we promise to have really yummy refreshments and very lovely swag to give away. So now I'm going to let Ginny talk about how HC Tug came into being.
So I was on the Qualtrics community page and got a private message from a guy named Heath, and he was asking how Winston-Salem State built their course evaluation in Qualtrics. And since I ran that whole survey for several years, I was able to talk back and forth with him and help him understand some of the inner workings. And over the course of time, I happened to ask, well, do you also use Tableau at your institution? And sure enough, the answer was yes. And then he told me about Stephanie, who had just moved to the same city where I lived and who had started a Tableau user group in Indiana. And I thought, hey, this is perfect. I've wanted to start a Tableau user group for ages. I didn't think enough people in Western North Carolina were using Tableau. Wrong. I didn't really know how to get one up and off the ground and get it started, but Stephanie did. So I asked Heath to give me her email address. I reached out and we were able to meet at a restaurant for lunch at a buffet before all this COVID happened, and sat down and talked about what we needed to do to start a user group. And so we were able to kick it off. We reached out to Jordan Scott at Tableau, who helped us understand how to set up the site, how to start an event, how to get guest speakers, and they helped us establish our new user group. And then we started planning for our first meeting, which was supposed to be today in person in Boone, directly following our App State Analytics Day, but it didn't really work out that way because COVID happened. And so here we are meeting virtually for the first time, but we think this is a good thing because it allowed us to get people from a much wider area to come to our first meeting. So thank you for being here.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jenny. I think we're ready to move into the presentation portion of our meeting today. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen so Jenny can share hers, and she is going to talk about data stories in Tableau.
Thank you, Stephanie. Can everybody hear me, see the screen all right? Great.
Oh, yeah.
Right, so as an institutional research employee, I work with a lot of data points every day. And when I say I work in institutional research, most people don't have a clue what that means or what I do. So let me tell you a little bit about it. So I work with data about students. I look at their grades, I look at their enrollment, you name it. And the dashboards that I build, that they look at things like average class size, course performance, registration trends, things of that sort. So for the most part, my job is pretty technical. You know, we have to respond to data requests from national and state like surveys, and then we also have to answer ad hoc requests from different people at the university. So it's not very often that I get the opportunity to really tell a story with data. But today I do want to tell you a story, and my story is called Every Person is a Data Point. So what you're looking at here is a jigger plot showing GPAs of all enrolled students across 9 terms. So it gives us a quick picture of how thousands of students are performing. But what if we just wanted to focus on one single student? Meet Virginia. What do we know about her? She wears high heels when she exercises. She loves babies and surprises. But no, all kidding aside, we don't know much. The data that we collect in higher ed tells us a few things. We know she's a freshman. She's a white female. She's from a rural county in North Carolina. She ranked 3rd in her high school class. Whoops, sorry, the share screen is right next to my navigation tool. All right. Can I move this? Yes. All right. She wants to be a psychology major. And in her first term, her GPA was almost a 3.0, which isn't too bad. But she's really more than just a data point. What if we could know more? What if we knew that she didn't get along with her roommate, or that she was working 32 hours a week while going to school? What if we knew that she was too shy to join a club and doesn't really have time to anyway? But we don't have the data that tells us that. So by the second semester, things were off to a rocky start for Virginia. We know that, but we don't really know why. But what if we did know that she'd only made 3 new friends, but she doesn't ever get to see them because of her work schedule? Or that she goes home every single weekend to see her boyfriend and do laundry. But the data doesn't tell us that. In her 3rd semester, things continued to get worse. But we don't know why. What if we knew that she moved back home and now had to commute 60 minutes each day just to go to school? What if we knew she was working 2 different jobs now? And that despite that, some days she still didn't have enough money to buy lunch at the cafeteria. But the data doesn't tell us that. So by the end of her sophomore year, Virginia hit rock bottom. Well, with her GPA anyway. She was struggling in her psychology classes. Her best friend dropped out of college. Her boyfriend broke up with her during finals week, and she quit her job. But the data doesn't tell us any of that. So let's pause for just a minute here. Now, as an institutional research employee or a faculty member, an advisor, someone who works at the college and has access to this data, what would we think if all we could see was the student whose GPA had been steadily dropping for 2 years? What questions would we be asking? Well, we would ask, is she going to stay in school? Is she going to graduate? And if she does, will it be on time? Should she change majors because she's having such a hard time in psychology? Does she need tutoring? Maybe that would help. What can we do to help her? They were all good questions, but nobody was asking, or at least they weren't asking her. Despite that, things started to change. Her junior year, without a boyfriend to distract her, Virginia moved back on campus and changed majors to anthropology. She made new friends and started a work-study job on campus. Things were looking up. By the next term, Virginia was holding steady. She joined the anthropology club. began making friends in her major, and she even got her old job back. Then by the beginning of her senior year, it looks like she's finally found her stride. She's living off campus with her 3 best friends. She's taking on more responsibility at work, but not to the detriment of her grades this time. And this semester, for the first time, she made the dean's list. In the next term, she made the dean's list again, and then enrolled in summer school. She still wouldn't be able to graduate on time because of her late change in major, but that's okay, because there's no stopping her now. Virginia graduated 1 semester late. Her last term GPA was 3.9 on a 4-point scale, which brought her cumulative GPA just over a 3. After that, she took 2 years off school to work, and then began graduate school. She graduated with her master's in the midst of a recession and had to work retail jobs for several years until she finally found her place. And that place was in institutional research. And years later, she's standing here talking to you about storytelling with data, because I'm Virginia, and this is my data story. So let's revisit our opening statement. Every person is a data point. Or rather, I'd encourage you to turn it around. Every data point is a person. And every person has a story. And we may not ever be able to know the stories behind each individual dot in our visualization, because the data to tell those stories does not exist, at least not in the database I work with. However, if we simply change the way that we think about these dots on a page, if we remember that the people behind them, there are people behind them, I think it can make us better at what we do each and every day. So, this is a data story that I built in Tableau. And I feel like the story feature in Tableau is relatively underutilized. It has a very specific place and time when it's appropriate, and that's probably why. In institutional research, I most often see it used to create a fact book, because it does resemble a book, or to recreate a PowerPoint presentation. But because it's not widely used, I wanted to point out a few things about it that are unique and different compared to using dashboards and tabs to navigate your data viz, things that you might not know or might not be immediately apparent if you're building a story for the first time. So first of all, you can use a couple of different options to start building a story. You can click your story tab down here at the bottom, or you can come up to the top and create a new story. When you are building a story, you can use worksheets or dashboards in the story. So the interface is the very same drag and drop you're all familiar with when you're making a dashboard. So you can add text here. And then you can size that however you like. You can choose to show or hide your title up here just by checking or unchecking this box. You can change the dimensions of your story display here. I like to use letter landscape just in case anybody were to want to print it out. And then if you go under the layout screen, you're going to see different options than you would see in a dashboard layout. And these are your navigator buttons. So what you see up here at the top. You have a few different options. You can do numbers. You can use dots, which is what I used in my story. You can use arrows, and that's if you don't want people to skip ahead or backwards. Or you can use caption boxes, which I see people use a lot because you can actually put the narrative of your story in the caption box. In the caption box, you can resize however large or small you need it, but keep in mind that as you build out your story, all of the caption boxes will be the same size. So you may have a lot of text for one and a very small amount of text for another. So you may not necessarily want them to be the same size, but they're going to be. So if you have an excess amount of text, you might just want to put it in the text box in your story. So how do you add another page to this story? You can't right click or anything like you would in a dashboard, but you can enter a new story point here. You can either create a blank one, or if there was something on the slide, you could create a duplicate. So let's put something on here. I just pulled an example worksheet onto the space. So if you have a worksheet on one page, and that same worksheet in a dashboard on the next page, you might think it's interesting that if you change your filter on the page of the story, if you were doing this in Tableau, if you were doing this in a dashboard, changing the filter would affect the sheet that that dashboard is built from. But when you do it in a story, it does not change the filter in the story. And it works the same way with parameters too. So we have a worksheet and we have a dashboard. Now, let's go and look at this dashboard on the screen. Wrong one. All right, so here we have our dashboard on the screen. So let's say I wanted to change my filter here and have it go from 2 to 4. Does that change the dashboard in my story? No, it does not. But if I'm in a story and I create another page and I pull in the same dashboard, here's the change that I made in the dashboard. Here's the original in the story, hasn't been affected by that change. So going back to our example dashboard, we made this change here. This dashboard is built on this example sheet. And when we look at the sheet, it has changed the filter on the sheet. So then let's go back into our story and check. And sure enough, it has also changed our filter in the story. So the lesson learned here is it's better to use dashboards and stories than to use worksheets. You can make changes in dashboards that will not affect your viz in the story. But if you change a dashboard and you have the same worksheet in the story, it is going to affect that worksheet. So note to self, better to use dashboards. However, it's nice to know that you can use the same dashboard over and over in a story and not have to create 5 different dashboards with 5 different filter settings to make 5 different story points. You can use the same dashboard, just make sure that you pull it into the story before you make the next change, and then pull the next one into the story before you make another change. Clear as mud, right? One last thing I'll show you about stories is that it is not as intuitive, at least it wasn't to me, how to delete a story page if you don't want it in the story any longer. I kept trying to right click and go up here and use the delete button, and none of that worked. But then I realized, oh, there's an X. You can just click that and get rid of that sheet that you don't need anymore. So that's just a little bit about how to build a story in Tableau in a nutshell. And I will stop sharing my screen, and if anyone has any questions, I am happy to take them.
Thank you, Jenny. That was awesome. I think what impressed me most about your presentation is the reminder of how important it is to not forget that our data represents people. And I think in this age of the COVID and everybody just running to try to, do vizzes on COVID stats, I think sometimes people forget that these are people here. They're not just data points. So thank you so much for that reminder. I do have one question for you. I have found in my past background that stories are really underutilized. What do you think? What have you experienced?
I've only used the story feature in Tableau, I think twice. And both of the times it was for a presentation at, well, a conference first and now this. I definitely, in the story that I built for the conference, we were wanting to lead the group through a very specific series of, it was kind of like a puzzle, and we only wanted to reveal a certain plot point at a certain time. And so it really helped to have the story to build out the plot. And I thought it was excellent for that. The story feature I used here was, it kind of allowed me to, build that story arc that we read about, the plot thickens, the climax, and then the downfall. So this was originally created for a workshop on storytelling that was supposed to be part of a much bigger, kind of a hands-on thing where we taught the group how to organize their storyline, how to storyboard, and then build it into something like this. So it was part of a much bigger piece, but I thought it worked really well for this kind of, I keep saying story, but that's what it is. Mm-hmm. But when I see them used for fact books, I really find it's just as easy to use the dashboard tabs as it is to create a story for a fact book, but it definitely works both ways.
Okay, great. Thank you again. And your storytelling ability is excellent, by the way.
Thank you. I see a question from Jared, or sorry, maybe more of a comment, the filter difference. Do people use stories in corporate companies? I've never worked in a corporate company. Stephanie or Chris, do you want to chime in? Do you have any experience with that?
Stephanie's shaking her head. I'll join in. Yeah, so I actually concur 100% with exactly what you said about using the dashboard tabs and being able to see the tab view across the top. We've used a few different instances where one of our creators wanted to create kind of that linear flow, telling the story, working from point to point, and utilizing the verbiage at the top to kind of move through those stories. Whereas the tabs across the top of the dashboard are really just super small in the names of the dashboard. So it's not really conducive to provide that extra kind of context and the story itself. So yeah, I'd say about 9 times out of 10, I will just relegate back to using the dashboard and the tabs view. But I think it's definitely something that I would like to see more of in my company and across the landscape. I will say though, the only thing, and I'm kind of mentioning this to if any Tableau developers are listening, it is severely limited in what you can do with the stories. I wish that you could, like for instance, our corporate logo sits on top of every one of our dashboards. And so for the gentleman that was creating the dashboard, it was fantastic because he had his story and everything, but the corporate logo took up so much because you only have so much, screen real estate on a story. It took up so much in the upper left-hand corner that his dashboard just got shrunk that much more. Whereas if we could, utilize the whole story, the whole, frame up in the story point header to put like corporate logos or anything up there, that would be fantastic if we could customize that. So again, if you have ideas like that for Tableau, I'll just mention this, go into the Tableau forums and you can vote them up. So again, great thing. But yeah, I totally agree. I would love to see more of them utilized in stories.
I definitely think one of the hardest part about using the story feature is coming up with the story to tell. I think it takes a lot more work than just analyzing the data, putting a dashboard together where people can explore it on their own. I think being able to pick out what's important and really hone in on that and share that with people is more difficult than just building a dashboard.
Okay. Any more questions, folks? Okay, thanks. Thanks, Jenny.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to introduce Chris to everybody. Chris is an experienced data visualization architect and community leader with a passion for transforming data into actionable insights. In addition to leading Genworth's Tableau Center of Excellence, Christopher leads the Raleigh-Durham Tableau User Group and is a Tableau User Group ambassador. Chris is a frequent speaker at data conferences and industry events and actively consults on data management, self-service, analytics, and Tableau training. Chris lives in Apex, North Carolina with his wife and 4 kids, and he is just getting ready to move. So Chris, if you are ready, we're going to hand it off to you.
All right, fantastic. Thank you so much. All right, I'm going to share my screen. Can everyone see my screen, Stephanie? Okay, give a thumbs up. Okay, fantastic. All right, yeah, you're my source of verbal confirmation here. So, all right, well, fantastic. Thank you so much, Ginny and Stephanie and the whole High Country Tableau user group for having me. I was very excited when Stephanie and Ginny reached out to me a few months ago talking about kicking off the Tableau user group up in the High Country. I obviously have a sweet spot in my heart for Boone and the whole High Country because I did go to school up at Appalachian State. And I swear, Ginny, we've never talked about this before, but I feel like you told my exact story. That was your story points were almost exactly mine at Appalachian State, and so that definitely every piece of data is every point is a person, and so I very wholeheartedly concurred with that entire story. So that's kind of what I'm so thankful that the stories really do tie in so well together, because what we're going to talk about here is really all about those meaningful analytics, not just, again, exactly like Jenny said, not just providing data, just dumps of data, or even the good data visualization. All of those things are really second nature and secondhand to what is really the foundation of what we're trying to do with Tableau. And so the kind of subtitle of this presentation is how Tableau enables speed to insight for data-driven decision-making. So lots of $4 words in there, but basically we want to focus here on how we can leverage data to make better decisions, drive to action, tell that story with the data, communicate those insights effectively, not just creating the most beautiful, sexy visualizations we can, but actually deriving value from our data and creating good visualizations in the same time. So again, thank you, Stephanie, for the fantastic introduction. I'll go over a little bit more into who I am. You can find me on Twitter at CGScottDVA. I am also, as Stephanie said, the father of 4 kids. Here they are, ranging down up from 2 all the way up to 10. They were headed to Great Wolf Lodge in Concord. So they were very excited that day, had their Christmas swag on. And yeah, so I love getting to involve them in Tableau and data visualization, data story. I mean, we talk about all the time about storytelling. So I focus, telling my kids, well, yeah, that thing that happened was important, but tell me the story behind it. What happened? So I'm constantly doing this, not only in my career, but also in my personal life as a dad. As she said, I'm an application development manager at Genworth Mortgage Insurance, where I also lead the Tableau Center of we call it a Tableau Center of Enablement. It's kind of like a center of excellence. What we're focused on is that key aspect that we want to serve to everyone that is using. We truly believe that whether they know it or not, whether they like it or not, every single person is an analyst. And so from my perspective, my team, our goal is to enable those analysts, those users, to utilize data to, again, same thing, to make decisions based on that data. As Stephanie mentioned, I am the co-leader of the Raleigh-Durham Tableau user group. I have a fantastic team of 4 other people that have just helped me over the past few years to really take our Raleigh-Durham Tableau user group. I'll give you the link to our next virtual user group at the end of the talk, so stay tuned for that. But if you're ever down in Raleigh or Durham or Chapel Hill, Apex, anywhere around the triangle, hit me up. Our Twitter is #RDUTUG or @RDUTUG. You can find me on Twitter, email me, whatever you want to do. Feel free to hit me up whenever you're down in the area. I love talking about Tableau, about data. So again, that's my open invitation. Anybody that wants to go, grab a beer, grab some coffee, whatever, this is a fantastic place to do that. So, and as she said, I am a Tableau ambassador. One of the great privileges that I have gotten being part of this Tableau community is being nominated as a Tableau ambassador, and it's specifically for user groups. I love helping out new user groups like the High Country Tableau user group that are getting started, people that just are hungry to meet with other data rock stars and to be inspired and to learn and grow from one another. That's literally, I say this without joking, literally why I get out of bed every day is because it's become such a big part of my life. So I'm happy to continue to share and give back to this community that really built me up in such a way that it has. So let's talk about data. Just great piggybacking off of what Jenny had mentioned about every single point of data. There is tons and tons and tons of it. It's everywhere. This was back from 2019. Another software company presented this data here. And then there's just so much data all around us all the time. A million videos played every minute. 188 million emails are sent every minute. Just the sheer amount of data. And so how do we derive value out of all of this data? And that's where we have started to harness the power of data by what's called business intelligence. So we've all heard this word before. It is, again, kind of a buzzword. We've all heard it. It's become almost cliche. So as we think about what is business intelligence, let's start with the definition. And it's leveraging, business intelligence leverages software and services to transform data into actionable insights that inform an organization's strategical and tactical business decisions. So all of that, as I mentioned before, we want data that not only, we want data that tells a story, that helps us to make better decisions, drives people to action, rather than just says, okay, well, here's the data, and then you go and do whatever you want with it. We want to actually be able to help them drive and navigate to actual real decisions that are going to make for most organizations, make more money, but overall just make better decisions on their day-to-day and long-term and strategic goals. So as you all are pretty aware, a lot of business decision-making is made by random charts and graphs that mean, could mean anything. Typically they're made by gut decisions. So you see here, Warren's here in charge of our gut feelings. And then, sometimes gut feelings can be bad indigestion from pizza that somebody had the night before. So the key here is that we've for a very long time been using this kind of gut-driven decision-making and just charts that really are just there to kind of be there. They don't really provide any value. So with business intelligence, we have sought to transfer from this gut intuition into a more data-driven thought, data-oriented decision making. And now we can again leverage software like Tableau to help do this, to really get our hands on the data and move from our gut intuition into a more data-driven decision making. So we're going to play a little game here. The chat is open. I'm going to give you about 10 seconds to kind of talk. Let's talk about some of the ways that we process data. So we'll play a little game here, and it's called Count the Nines. So I want you all to put in the chat there when you think you have a guess as to how many nines. And I'm looking at my clock now, getting you about 10 more seconds. So go ahead and put in the chat how many nines you see. 20, 3. All right, 2 more seconds. 2, 1. All right, nobody is even close. Let me help you out here. All right, try again. The same 10 seconds. How many nines do you see? There you go. Matthew, Jenny. Yes, Stephanie. Wow, how easy is that? So when we talk about processing information, how our brain perceives information, again, moving, how can we get those insights even quicker? It's not just about data. It's actually about deriving value and insights out of data. And so we want to leverage some of these inane things that we have already in our brain. So we're going to get scientific here for a little minute, for a minute, and we're going to talk about the brain. So I'll only spend a few seconds on this, but basically this is kind of how our brain functions. So, data is interpreted, it comes into our eyes, and it immediately goes right back into our visual cortex here. This is where we see and we process information immediately. And then it has to go into, as we start to kind of process it, the more we process, that information actually moves up into our cerebral cortex. So we want to leverage things. We want to use attributes, things that we can do that are going to, these pre-attentive attributes that our visual cortex is going to process to help us to derive insights and find value in the data immediately without having to shift it to the front of our brain into our thinking process. And so I've talked about this a lot in the past, and I'm sure you all have heard this before, this idea of reducing cognitive lift, or I've called it decreasing cognitive load. And basically it's just this, I actually read an article on it. You all can go out to mindtools.com and look up cognitive load theory. It is a fantastic idea here. So the idea here is that it's the amount of information that our brains can hold at one time. This is also the reason why having scroll bars on your visualization doesn't work. Sorry, I'll provide the chat. I'll provide the link in the information at the end. But the idea here is that our brains can only hold a certain amount of information at a time. And so as we, and basically here, this article says that since working memory has a limited capacity, we should avoid overloading it with additional activities that don't directly contribute to, he says training, I say analysis. So it's a great, again, we're all in Tableau. We talk about visual analytics. If you look at something like this, our brains are having to process and go, okay, well, here's 1. Okay, that's incoming information. Now we're going up to 2, and I'm going down to 5. Oh, okay, here's 5. Now I've forgotten. Our short-term memories, I mean, if we talk about the dog on Up, he sees a squirrel. I mean, I'm already distracted by 10 things by the time I'm looking up what number 2 is. So our brains are pretty fantastic tools, but there's lots of stuff, lots of things going on around us at any time. And so the more things we have going on around us, the more things we have in our visualization, our brains are going to be focused, and it's going to move into that first part of our brain, and it's going to take that much longer for us to interpret the data. And then as we move to insight, it's going to be that much longer for us to interpret, find value in the data, provide the insight, and then let's communicate those insights. So what we want to do is use things like, for instance, so this would be a better way that we can kind of reduce our cognitive load by just directly labeling it. It takes a little bit more, a little bit more work to actually put the pieces on the visualization. But now immediately, I don't have to go track, every time. I know, kind of revealing my age here, when we had atlases and maps, and we'd have to go look at the legend and say, okay, well, the McDonald's is at B36A12, on our atlas, and we had to go use our finger and go up and over and down and kind of meet in the middle here. And that's how we got to our points on an atlas. Well, how great would it be if the McDonald's was just labeled right there, or the city, or whatever it was. So the more we can do that, the quicker our brains can process information, and then we can make our decisions that much faster. So again, that's what we're talking about here, is how do we utilize these kind of processes in our brain that are going to help us derive the insights and gain value from the data immediately. So we are, and this is where we talk about our human perception and cognition. So we're faster when we can see data. Now, but due to time constraints and everything, I usually like to play a game here. But if I were to ask you to find the least profitable segments, it's pretty easy, because we just look for that negative number, right? We look for a big number, or a longer number with a negative. But we're still doing a lot of mental processing. We have to go in and we have to actually read the numbers, because our brains don't immediately see 17996 and then process that is lower than 24084. Okay, so Michael says home office fasteners is the least profitable. Let's see. Maybe he meant fasteners. That is not the least profitable, because it is still positive. So it's all the negatives there. So anyway, the point is that our brains are really slow at doing this mental math. There was a class at Harvard, in Harvard's one of their master's programs, that when they were asked to do the multiplication of 24 times 36 in their heads, on average, it took these master's levels Harvard students 50 seconds to do it in their brain. Whereas if they were given a piece of paper and could scratch out the answer, yes, thank you, Ginny. So the point is that when they were given a piece of paper, they could do it in less than 10 seconds. So the more we assist our brains and help it to process the information faster, the more we can grab the insights and make those decisions. So now I'm asking you the same thing. The least profitable, we can see right here immediately, I'm drawn to furniture and tables. So I know immediately, but our brains still have to process information. They still have to say, okay, well, if I want to know that's least profitable, I want to know how much less, or I want to know, which ones are most profitable. Adding that simple color like we did earlier doesn't help me get to that information any faster. It doesn't help me get to that decision any faster. However, if we see the data, if we start to utilize these pre-attentive attributes, like seeing position on a piece of paper here, we can see the data, we immediately realize, okay, yes, tables are, but now we can see clearly how much better the copiers and accessories and the entire technology category is doing compared to our furniture segment. I mean, it is very clear with the, just the data. If I asked you to provide that same amount of insight here, it's going to be very difficult to tell exactly how much more profitable that one segment is than another one, versus if I can see the data, I can actually start to derive insights and make decisions that much quicker. So again, we talk about speed to insight. We want to make those decisions as quickly as possible. That's where we get to visualizing the data. When we can actually put visuals, we utilize color, we utilize the position, so bar charts, we utilize the shape, so differentiating shapes between one another, how big something is, how small something is. The more we can do that, the quicker we can get information. And that's where this whole cycle of visual analytics comes in. This is a Tableau thing that that has been utilized quite often. So when we get the task, we have a question, we go get some data, but then we choose, like Jenny talked about, how do we kind of tell that story? We have to choose the mapping, and then we view the data, then we develop some insight, we create some dashboards, some visualizations, and then we actually share that information out. Well, if I've got to spend all of my time, getting the data in, and then I'm viewing all of this data all at once in this huge table, I'm having to spend, how many times have we gone into Excel and created our pivot tables, and we're asking, we're asking this, and we're bringing it in, and then we got to go back to the beginning because no, that didn't really answer the question. We got to go grab all of our data again and repivot everything. Whereas modern business intelligence tools like Tableau help us to develop this insight at the speed of thought. So as quickly as we can think about dragging another pill onto the screen, we're developing more and more insight. We're actually viewing the data as we're doing that. So then we've already, as we drag the pills on the screen, as Jenny showed us, we're already developing our insight, and then we can share that insight. Again, this is one of the top reasons why I've been so adamant about Tableau Server for so long, is because if we just have our visualizations on our desktop, or we're just printing them out or sending the PDFs out to email, we're sharing the information out there, but we can't help to provide all of the data that's in there, give them the ability to touch and feel and ask questions and click through and interact with the data. And then if that's all we're giving them, they can't go and ask more questions. So again, the quicker we can get to that, from that question to not only that answer, but also sharing that answer with more people, the faster this process is going to go, and the better. We're going to get better decisions, but we're also going to get better questions that are going to help us to dive into more data, into more questions, to help us to figure out. That was so perfect, that what Jenny was talking about, just about the idea that, we see this trend going down, but why? Where are the other decision points? We don't see that, all of those random things that are happening to that college student. We don't see any of that stuff. But the more data we bring in, the more interactivity, the more we're asking people to interact with the data, the quicker they're going to get to that aha moment. This is why. It's exactly back to Jenny's story, that it was because of X, Y, and Z that never would have been revealed had we just been looking at that one trend line. It becomes, again, it's less of points on a chart, and it's now we can dive in and say, let's look at this specific person, look at this specific product or whatever it is, and dive into that data and get those insights, provide that context. And we need tools that are going to leverage this capability to help us to get to those answers faster. So again, data visualization can be really good at this, or it can also be really bad at this. And that's where I go back to the storytelling with data. And great segue here. The author of the book Storytelling with Data, Cole Nussbaum or Knopflick, says, don't be a data fashion victim. So just because it is, it's hype, it's hip, and it's trendy, don't fall susceptible to that. And again, simple beats sexy every time. I've told this to every one of my, trainees, all of the people within my company, that at the end of the day, the data visualization that's right for the data is what's going to win. So again, the book is Storytelling with Data. There's another version of it of where she actually gets in on the practical nature of storytelling with data. Fantastic books, highly recommend them. But this is a perfect example. So again, this could probably be pulled out for COVID. The idea here is that we've got this idea that the killers in Ebola affected countries, the authors are trying to tell the story that Ebola is not that big of a deal. We should really be focusing on malaria or even HIV and AIDS. Whereas in but the data doesn't help us. The viz doesn't help us to tell that story. Yes, we can see that it is smaller. Our brains immediately, you know, that kind of visual capability tells us, okay, it's pretty small. But if we're talking about targeting a specific, you know, disease or a specific area with new drugs, or we want to focus on specific things, we've got to have the data. And these, you know, when we're talking about these numbers, we've got to be more informed than this. So, you know, that's really where, going back to one of my, you know, prior visualizations, adding a simple direct label here helps to give us that information immediately and provides that direct, immediate insight to our visualization that gives us that information, helps us to derive that insight and to make decisions that much faster. So seeing that it's only 4 deaths per day in Ebola affected countries versus 552 and 685, there's no way I was going through and trying to do my measurements, you know, by hand or even with a ruler to try to get those exact measurements out. But at the end of the day, the best visualization is probably something simple. And in order, I mean, this was back in Newsweek, so they were obviously trying to grab attention with this visualization. But at the end of the day, a simple visualization beats the sexy one all day long, because our brains are going to be able to process that much faster how big of a difference the HIV and AIDS and malaria are in these countries versus Ebola and Lassa fever. The things that are really getting, you know, the kind of the news attention are like the Ebola, or, you know, again, take it back to where we are right now, to coronavirus, when in reality, the data is telling a different story. So I say good visualization, so good visualization at you know, or bad visualization at best, if we're being very gracious, misleads. At worst, it can lie to us. So again, we want to be careful of how we're telling stories with data. And to kind of talk more through that, there's a fantastic series of blogs by Dark Horse Analytics. I think they're up in Toronto, Canada, that they talk about data looks better naked. So when we talk about visualizing data, we want to bring the focus to the data, not what's all around it. So ways we can do that, again, taking a simple bar chart, and we can lighten the lines, remove the lines, direct label. Again, how important is direct labeling when somebody doesn't have to trace over to their line? So here's the before, here's the after. The more we can focus on the data and the less on all of the other chart junk, as one of my favorite authors, Kaiser Fung, has said, strip away all the chart junk and focus on the data. Because why? What is the most important thing we're after? We're after driving people to insights as quick as possible and focusing on the data where it is, rather than all the other ancillary stuff that may not have anything to do with the actual data or the insights we're trying to drive them to. So this can also happen on maps as well. So here's our original map. I'm sure you all have seen something like this. Maybe even in some of the new Corona maps. Again, some of the best visualizations that have come out have been some of the simplest visualizations. So when we strip away all of the chart junk, really highlight, focus the emphasis, and really highlight those specific areas, we're starting to see a better picture of what the data is trying to tell us. Whereas in this first visualization, we have no idea where are the hot spots, where are the low spots. But if we do these simple tips, it will help us to drastically improve how well we can drive that speed to insight. And the last one, my favorite, pie charts. So our brains just do not function or do not work very well with determining sizes of pies. Anybody that's ever had a pizza and tried to think, oh, well, I think I can have one more piece, they understand immediately that our brains are not too good at determining how big of a piece that is. So hold on, I really wanted to start that over. It's not going to let me start over. So obviously a better way to present a pie chart is to kind of strip away things and really focus on the data. And oftentimes a better way to present data that our brains can read quicker is through a bar chart. So I want to kind of move through these pretty quickly, but when we talk about processing information, getting things together, again, the whole idea that Ginny mentioned before about these telling stories with data on the Tableau story points, I want to talk about that with dashboards. So the dashboards, as you may or may not know, again, just simple definition, is the visual display of data used to monitor conditions and or facilitate understanding. So the quickest thing we can think about with a dashboard are, which you see almost every day. Maybe not now, maybe because you're not taking your car to work every day. But most days you're presented with this information, and it's so simple that we trust 15 and 16-year-olds to get behind the car, get behind the wheel, and be able to interpret what this means without a whole lot of training. So again, using these pre-attentive attributes, I know immediately bright red light goes off, my attention is focused there. I can see very quickly, these quick kind of gauges, and I don't have to know every single thing that's going on in my engine to help me get from point A to point B. Well, we can also have information overload on our dashboard, as many of you have seen this before, on an airplane cockpit. Now, I know this very, very well because my uncle just went through his pilot's license training, and he had to study for months, take hours and hours and hours of test flights, and he has to know what every single one of these buttons and dials and gauges means, because these are all critical and important to keeping a plane in the air and getting it down on the ground safely. So the difference here is that when we're presenting information and helping to guide people to tell the story, we want to be able to do what's called the 5-second test with our dashboards. So our 5-second test has basically 3 rules. What are you seeing? Why should you care? And then what should you do next? So again, go back to our primary example here. If I'm using the 5-second test, I immediately know what I'm seeing. I'm seeing the speed. I know, what, again, go back to why should you care? Because I don't want to get a ticket, right? And I want to keep the car running. And then what should I do next? Okay, maybe I'm going over the speed limit. Oh, looks like my check engine light came on. I should take it to a mechanic. Whereas if I'm looking at an airplane cockpit, unless I have years and years of training, if that little alarm button goes off and I don't know what that does, it says nothing to me other than alarm. Or what if one of those other red lights goes off? Without a lot of training and a lot of information behind that, this dashboard does not pass the 5-second test. And I go out the wall and see what sticks. We are given lots of information here, but if I'm looking through here and trying to process what does red mean, then I'm gonna have a lot of trouble getting into what is the difference between this red versus this red versus this red and this red. And if I zoom in, I could zoom in a little, and I don't know if I can do. Oh yeah, I can. Okay, awesome. So if I zoom in a little, I can tell that this looks like this is computer products. I don't know what this means. This red means sales. This means margin. This blue here means coal. This means something else. So I'm using lots of different colors, different visualizations. Whereas on a simple dashboard, I can look and I can see very quickly, okay, simple colors, red actually means something. It means I should go do something. My profit ratio is down 9.2%. My average days to ship are up 4%. If I'm the manager in this region, I know immediately what I've got to do. So I know the 5-second test, it passes the 5-second test. I know what I'm seeing. I know why I care, because this is mine. I've made something very, very useful for me. And then last but not least, I know exactly what I'm going to do with that data. So what about Tableau? So this is a Tableau user group. How does Tableau help in doing this? Well, Tableau's mission is that it helps people to see and understand their data. So we've talked all about all of these 5-second tests and dashboards and why we use visual analytics to help us to process data, to get speed to insight really quickly. Well, Tableau is the hands in the tool of the every user, right? And Ginny talked about this with her story. Mine, again, is very similar, not only in college, but also in the example where I had no idea about data. I didn't know, I came from a background in history and psychology. I had no idea what I was doing, but Tableau gave me the skills to be able to drag and drop data on the screen, to interact with it, to put my hands on this data, and then actually start to create visualizations in real time that are helping me to not only process the data, but also share and communicate my insights in an easy way that's going to help everyone understand what the information is. And again, pass those 5-second tests, help people to understand what it is they're seeing, to help to understand why they should care, and then most importantly, what they should do about it. So as you process all of these, kind of the foundation here, no amount of Tableau training is going to get you into understanding these core concepts. And that's why I said before, this is all foundational to creating Tableau visualizations, to telling good stories. We have to talk about this first, because if we don't, then we're going to create beautiful visualizations. We're going to create, again, the sexy visualizations. We're going to create everything in Tableau, and it's going to be fantastic, but nobody's going to look at it. Nobody's going to value our insights, because it's going to get lost on them without understanding these key principles of creating meaningful analytics that are going to help drive decision-making with using data. So Tableau, and I want to hark on this because it's not even just about the knowing the understanding of the visual analytics and these foundational principles, but it's also about community. And so when we talk about building analytics and driving these questions and creating value in our data, we're also talking about community, because none of this, as I've been working in this industry for over 8 years now, I have realized one thing, and that's that this is not when we talk about driving insights, creating value out of our data, this is not something we can do in a vacuum. It's not something that we can do on our own. It all drives in community. And Tableau itself is not only a tool that is built in community, Tableau is a community in itself. And that's why this group, this Tableau user group, that's why I've invested so much of my time into our Tableau user group, is because not only does it help us to find out better ways that we can bring insight to people that much faster and use data to help drive better decisions, but it also helps us to grow and get engaged and become better, not only at what we're doing with Tableau, but also better people in general. And I know, Stephanie, thank you for mentioning this on the front end, that Tableau is a community and a software and a company that is so focused on not only creating better visualizations to help companies make more money, but it's also a community that is interested in helping to make the world a better place. So with things like Do Good Data, helping education relief efforts in third world countries, helping to find and eliminate malaria in these countries, as you all saw on that last visualization. I mean, the key is that malaria is still a big issue in these African countries, especially in Zambia. But we can start to use data to eliminate these things. So as we talk about again, more efforts, visualizing gender equality, Tableau's latest effort with Makeover Monday, visualizing equality using data to help tell these stories as they are. So this latest one on FGM in Tanzania, we had our interns in my company participate in this Makeover Monday, and they were again able to showcase the exact story. I could not wait to tell this story, because that's exactly what we talked about. We talk about number of records. So Tableau puts number of records on every dashboard. When you bring the data in, you get number of records. Well, I challenged this cohort that when you talk about number of records, you're not, with this data set, you're not talking about records. You're not talking about data. You're not talking about dots. You're talking about these girls and these women. I mean, the bottom chart there tells it the best. The majority of these girls that come in are under the age of 18. The hotspot in this data are 14-year-old girls that this is happening to. So when we talk about data, it's a real thing. We talk about real people, and when we make these decisions, make these dashboards, they're having real impact on people's lives. And so it has been just such an honor and a privilege to work with this company, do these projects that can actually have real lasting impact on our world around us, rather than just focusing on the business problems that we're solving on a day-to-day basis. So for the sake of time, I won't go into this, but I highly recommend watching this video on what Tableau has helped them to do with the malaria in Zambia, how they've helped them to almost eradicate malaria in several regions in Zambia. So highly recommend watching that video on your own. But I also wanted to make a quick plug for our RDU Tableau user group next Thursday afternoon, about the same time as this. Thursday from 4:30 to 6 p.m. Feel free to go and register 2020 Q2 rdutug.splashthat.com. We'll be, again, same thing, having Zen masters, Tableau experts come and learn and be engaged. Again, we're welcome to all. So I would love to see you all there. And yes, if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer them at this time. So thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
Yes.
Are there any questions? It sounds like everybody loved your presentation. Okay. Well.
All right, I will stop sharing.
Okay.
All right.
If anybody has
questions.
Oh, I'm sorry, Chris. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say thank you for inviting me. It's been such a pleasure. I love seeing especially in my my stomping grounds of App State and in the high country. I love seeing this whole community of Tableau and data analysts sparking this this real blaze for analytics all throughout. It happens everywhere, so it's just so encouraging. So thanks for letting me be a part of it.
Oh, thank you. We really appreciate you joining us.
Yes, it was great to have you.
Yes. So let's go ahead and wrap things up. Thank you again for everybody tuning in and joining us, and we really hope to see you again next time. Next time will probably be sometime in September of this year. Of course, we don't know yet if it's going to be in person or if it's going to be virtual. We'll just have to wait and see what COVID brings us to at that point in time. But in the meantime, we're asking everybody to fill out this follow-up survey, and I did post the link to it in the chat panel. And I also plan to send out a reminder email tomorrow to everybody who attended. We ask that you fill this out. It's going to ask questions like your level of expertise with Tableau. It's going to ask your preference for location, time, date, things like that. And your responses will help Ginny and I kind of map a path for our organization, because we don't want it just to be Ginny and I. We really want it to be your group. So please make sure that you fill that out. And like I said, the next meeting will probably be in September sometime. Tableau requires that TUGs have quarterly meetings, so that would be the next quarter. And if anybody has questions, I've put my email address and Ginny's email address. And as we start developing our community page, things like that, we will keep everybody posted as well. Ginny, have I missed anything? Anything you want to include?
Nothing that I can think of. It's a very short survey, so you definitely, it won't take you long to fill it out, promise.
Okay. Well, if there's nothing else, I think we will close from here. Thank you again for everybody for coming, and we will talk to you all again soon. Thanks. Bye.
Thanks so much for coming.
Thank you.